everybody. I'm going to ask you to come in and sit down if you can so we can get started. We have a tremendous closing panel and keynote from Congresswoman Linda Sanchez this afternoon, so we'd like to get started. But first, it is my extremely great pleasure to introduce someone who has helped guide ACS since its very beginning. Antonia Hernandez is a nationally recognized figure in strengthening underserved communities. She joined the California Community Foundation as the president and CEO in February of 2004. Previously, Antonia was president and general counsel of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, or MALDEF. And among her many areas of knowledge, she is an expert in civil rights and immigration issues. So please join me with welcoming one of our superstars in ACS, Antonia Hernandez.
And actually, I'm short, and this is an opportunity to be really tall. No, Caroline didn't have to do this, but I do. Us shorties have to, take every opportunity. But I want to thank everyone for being here today. As you all, I'm sure, agree, it's been a great conference, a great gathering, and we're going to hear from an extraordinarily dynamic individual. And hopefully all of you will stay for the panel discussion afterwards on an issue of current importance, and that is the issue of immigration and what's happening in Arizona and throughout the country. But for the moment, let me introduce our guest speaker. I am honored to introduce this evening featured speaker, U.S. Congresswoman Linda Sanchez. Congresswoman Sanchez has represented California's 39th Congressional District since 2003, and she has quickly become a trailblazer and leader in Congress. She is the first Latina to serve on the Ways and Means Committee and the House's first Latina to serve on the Judiciary Committee. Congresswoman Sanchez garnered national recognition for her leadership of the congressional investigation into the Bush administration's firing of 9 U.S. attorneys in 2006. Her call for Karl Rove to be held in contempt for his refusal to testify before Congress regarding the administration's role in politicizing the Department of Justice was courageous. Her actions reinforce the significance of having a check on the executive branch, of the power of the proper role each branch of government should play, and the need for transparency in government. Linda is the co-founder of the Labor and Working Family Caucus, which seeks to ensure that workers are kept safe on the job from industrial accidents, as well as employer intimidation and retaliation. Her upbringing is equally inspiring. She is one of 7 children born in Orange County, California, of immigrant parents from Mexico. Congressman Sanchez's sister, Loretta, is also a U.S. representative from California. They are the first sisters and the first women of any relations to ever serve in Congress together. Congresswoman is also a mother of a lovely young toddler, and so it is a great pleasure and a delight to introduce to you Representative Linda Sanchez to join us this evening.
Thank you, Antonia, for that really beautiful introduction and for the very tall box, which makes me feel tall as well. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here this evening with y'all because I'm such a big fan of the American Constitution Society for Law and Policy and the good work that all of you do to promote justice for all Americans. Back when I was in law school in the early 90s, all that we had on our campus was the Federalist Society. And yes, you can go ahead and boo. And the Federalist Society was working hard to instill its extremely conservative vision into law schools, the courts, and all levels of our government. And so far, I have to say, it's done a pretty good job of reaching its goals. In fact, If we compare the composition of the Supreme Court in 1982, when the Federalist Society was founded, to the composition today, I'd say it's done a really bang-up job. No more Marshalls, no more Brennans, and no appointment in sight yet of a jurist with the ability to balance out Justice Scalia's extreme right-wing views. But with the advent of the American Constitution Society, the left is back. You guys can cheer now. Yes. ACS has already come a really long way, and I was reminded this of Wednesday night while I was playing, of all things, in a softball game. You see, the women in Congress have come together to play a softball game for charity, and this year we played against members of the media. It's a good time, and you get to see the members of Congress get down in the dirt, both literally and figuratively. And while I was out on the field, I looked over and I saw two women making their way through the crowds of fans over to our dugout. Justice Sotomayor and Madeleine Albright had come out to watch us play, of all things. And I have to tell you, it was very exciting to see two powerful, progressive faces looking back at me from the dugout. And I share this with you because I want you to know what extraordinary work you do and how far you've come. I share in your mission to ensure that fundamental principles of human dignity, individual rights and liberties, genuine equality, and access to justice enjoy their rightful center place in American law. That is why when I was first elected to Congress, I specifically fought for a seat on the Judiciary Committee, and it's why I also founded the Labor and Working Families Caucus. And it's why every day I fight to make the American dream of social justice, economic opportunity, and the chance to fulfill one's potential a reality for all Americans. But even with both houses of Congress and the White House in Democratic hands, the fight is not easy still. I don't think or expect that it ever will be. Those with the advantages, with power and the leverage will always fight to hold on to that. But you and I will keep fighting to move forward and speak truth to the power that needs to hear it. Sometimes I actually even get bashed in the media for speaking the truth, and I sort of wear that as a badge of honor. Because it doesn't stop me. I don't let people bully me or cow me from speaking out when I feel that something is wrong. I learned to stand up early in my life. As Antonia mentioned, I come from a family of 7 children, 4 of whom were brothers that tortured me on a nearly daily basis. And so you learn to be scrappy and stand up for yourself. And if I hadn't had that kind of upbringing, I don't know that I would be the person that I am today. So tonight, what I want to do, I just want to share a few of the things I'm working on as part of my effort to speak that truth to power, which is really missing from our discourse, unfortunately, today. Let's start with the rightful place of the citizen to engage in political discourse and figuring out how to get the voice of the people back after the very wrongly decided Citizens United versus FEC decision. Before this unfortunate right turn, we in Congress had assumed that we could place some reasonable limits on corporate spending in campaigns for reasons of transparency and fairness, balance, and frankly, to actually let the citizens who vote in elections get a word in edgewise. Under the McCain-Feingold bill, also known as the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, corporations could not air election ads within 60 days of an election. But the practical outcome of the Citizens United decision was to unleash all restraints on corporate spending, giving corporations an even more disproportionate voice in elections than they previously had. It seems like a very troubling conclusion to me, but I can see the progress and the legal evolution of what led to that decision. The Supreme Court's decisions on takings law, punitive damages, and civil rights have been tacking to the right for the last 30 years. The legal fiction that a corporation is a person, adopted basically to ease the administration of justice, has become a legal fact, endowing corporations with basic liberties we normally think of as the rights of individual human beings. One problem with this current line of reasoning is that it harms the American people. A corporation's unlimited right to influence political campaigns may very well impinge on the rights of the actual citizens who do the voting. It can drown out the voice of the people, leaving the public confused, misled, or so sick of the noise that they adopt the throw out all the bastards approach to voting, or just tune out public discourse altogether. Not something that's very healthy for a democracy. As you would expect, many of my colleagues have introduced legislation to try to get at the heart of that wrongly decided case, and they have a number of legislative responses to the Citizens United predicament. I myself introduced a constitutional amendment worth considering. It's an amendment that would clarify that corporations may be treated as individuals under the law, but are not, in fact, individuals. It specifies that corporations may sue and be sued, for instance, but they cannot vote, and they may have their ability to spend money to influence campaigns restricted if Congress so chooses. Is that proposal a radical notion? Well, some would say it is. And if it is, it's only because it's a response to how far to the right our law has taken us in recent decades. I believe that the average American would agree that the law ought to protect the individual and do a better job of restraining corporate excesses. While my proposal is likely to be dismissed by those on the right, I'm encouraged by the House of Representatives' consideration of the Disclose Act, a related bill that I support. Introduced by Representative Chris Van Hollen, the Disclose Act seeks to mitigate some of the damage caused by the Citizens United case by requiring corporate executives to state their approval for an ad, much like I do when I run a political ad on TV. It would also require greater reporting to the FEC regarding independent expenditures and prohibit companies owned or controlled by foreign nationals from contributing to federal elections. However, the most important part of this bill is its attempt to seek transparency. If corporations are going to spend thousands, millions, or even tens of millions of dollars to influence our elections, I think that the American voter has a right to know about it. Powerful special interests will not be able to hide behind sham organizations and dummy corporations. Americans will know who is paying for the messages that they read, see, and hear. In other words, Americans will be able to see the man behind the curtain if a corporation claims to be the Wizard of Oz. While not diminishing the disproportionate corporate money in campaigns, the Disclose Act, by helping to inform our citizens, is part of an effort to seek the truth. And I say this to my staff over and over again, the truth is a very stubborn thing. You can suppress it for a time, but eventually the truth will always be revealed. And I believe that the Disclose Act will help that truth come to light. And although I think the Disclose Act is a very good thing, it's a shame that we even need a bill like that in the first place. My constituents have actually asked me, how could the judges have ruled like this? And I think that's an important question to ask. I look at the Supreme Court and the appellate courts, and I see a lack of diversity. And I don't just mean a diversity of religion or race or gender. I mean a lack of diversity of experience. Our justices and our judicial nominees are increasingly from similar educational backgrounds, Ivy League schools and the Northeast Corridor, and they've held the same types of jobs in government and the judicial system. Without a diversity of experience, our courts continue to fail to be responsive to the needs of the American people. President Obama has taken some steps in the right direction, but that brings up another point that I want to discuss this evening. It's no longer just the U.S. courts that affect our destiny. Increasingly, our lives are affected by international arbitration panels whose decisions can affect our domestic efforts to promote public health, protect the environment, or to even simply buy American. You might know that one of the issues I'm extremely passionate about in my work in Congress is trade. And I've come to learn that it's kind of a niche issue. Many folks think that it's something that economists or only Wall Street types are interested in. So they ignore it and think that it's not relevant to their day-to-day lives. But nothing could be further from the truth. Our trade pacts have become comprehensive agreements impacting government procurement, immigration, and yes, even financial regulation. They contain investment chapters which guarantee rights to foreign investors. And when those foreign investors believe that their rights have been violated, they don't seek redress in U.S. courts like the average American does. They seek redress in international tribunals whose proceedings are not open to the public, who are not bound by either U.S. law or even by the stare decisis principle to follow their own prior decisions. And I want to give you just a few examples of why this is a dangerous practice and something that we need to work together to try to help reform. Several years ago, my home state of California learned that a gasoline additive, MTBE, which was meant to reduce emissions, was so viscous that it was leaking out of gasoline storage tanks and poisoning our water supply. The state government rightly banned the additive. But the Canadian producer of MTBE sued in an international tribunal under the investment provisions of NAFTA. Their claim? That California's action to protect its water supply and its people was a taking. An incredible claim, I know, think about it, but one that the United States was actually forced to defend. The U.S. was fortunate in that we won that case, but it was on a jurisdictional issue. The arbitration panel never got to the critical issue of whether banning a toxic additive could amount to an expropriation. Another case, which is still ongoing, is a case where Chevron Corporation is the defendant of a class action suit by native Ecuadorian peoples. The Ecuadorians claim that Texaco, which is now a part of Chevron bought them out, used outmoded drilling practices long outlawed in the U.S. for more than 25 years. And when it closed up shop and left the country, it left open pits of waste oil and a legacy of cancer, birth defects, and extreme environmental degradation. A decision on that case is expected soon from the Ecuadorian court. But Chevron, seeing the writing on the wall, has now sued the government of Ecuador, which is not even a party to the case, and they've sued them in an international tribunal. Chevron's claim is that the class action suit violates its investment rights. We don't know yet whether the Ecuadorians will receive the justice that they deserve. And we'll never know how many public health, safety, and environmental laws have been chilled by the mere threat of such suits. But we do know that there is never a shortage of big corporations taking advantage of investment provisions. We do know that these same corporations too often use their leverage to bully smaller countries. And we do know that our laws need to be refocused to protect the rights and lives of people and communities and not simply corporate profit. So as I tend to do, once I latch onto an issue, I'm trying to spread the word. I'm working on the problem, even though it's not a popular position in the Congress. And I'm trying to convince my colleagues in Congress and on the Ways and Means Committee specifically to rethink those investor right provisions. And hopefully they're starting to listen, because I'm beating them up enough that I think that I'm finally starting to get through to some of them. But there has got to be a better way to protect property rights. We can limit the types of cases that can be brought to those that would amount to taking under U.S. law. We can try to restrict suits used to blackmail and bully poorer nations. We can set stricter standards for getting in the courthouse, well, actually not the courthouse door, but the arbitration house door. After all, the parties always do have access to domestic courts as well. And when I work on these issues with my colleagues, I'm sometimes really frightened and surprised to see how concerned they are that we are protecting the corporate interests. I'm always more concerned about the voices in society that we don't hear from and those that are forced to remain silent. Today, unfortunately, there are none that are more silent and more overlooked than the voices of undocumented immigrants. They are the whipping boy of nearly every Republican in Congress, and by the way, a lot of Democrats too. From the day that I began my service in Congress, I've worked to draft and enact comprehensive immigration reform. That's the whole reason why I sought a seat on the Judiciary Committee. Immigration reform was long overdue when I got here in 2003. It was long overdue when the Senate failed to pass a reform package in 2007, and it remains long overdue today. We continue to work on this issue in the Congress, but with a new urgency and a new emphasis brought about by Arizona's anti-immigrant law, SB 1070. Now, reasonable parties can certainly disagree about the form that immigration reform should take or how enforcement of our immigration laws should be prioritized. But as lawyers, I think we can agree that the Arizona law has several characteristics that put its constitutionality into doubt. First, this law codifies racial profiling. Section 2B of the Arizona law reads, and I'm quoting here, for any lawful contact made by a law enforcement official where reasonable suspicion exists that the person is an alien who is unlawfully present, a reasonable attempt shall be made to determine the immigration status of the person. I quite honestly don't know how you enforce this law without racial profiling, even if in the same bill there is a specific directive that says not to racially profile. And that's the point. Either you racially profile or you risk being sued by an interested citizen for not enforcing the law strongly enough. Arizona Governor Jan Brewer says that she doesn't know what an undocumented worker looks like. And one of my apparently more amazing colleagues claims he could enforce the law by looking at the shoes of the person in question. I kind of wonder what he might think of my shoes. But seriously, I think we all know who this law is not aimed at, because there doesn't seem to be an uproar about the fact that we have undocumented Canadians and undocumented Irish living in the United States. So I doubt that the intent of that bill was to help apprehend the undocumented Canadians and Irish and others who don't look brown from being in this country. There are definite racial undertones to this legislation. Despite people's insistence to the contrary, I think that that's what really fundamentally is at the heart of this bill. To bring it home a little bit, I want to give you all a hypothetical situation. Now, I hope you all are far enough away from your bar exam that that word hypothetical didn't make you cringe. But assume for a moment that I'm in Phoenix and I go out for my daily morning jog. Okay, I don't jog, but I said this was a hypothetical, so work with me here. And let's just assume that I didn't take my wallet, because really, who takes their wallet with them when they go out jogging, right? I really wouldn't know, but joggers tell me this. Now, suppose I get stopped by a police officer and I don't have my identification on me. Is that enough for them to interview me? And if that police officer does interview me, will he take me down to the station because I don't happen to have my ID? Or will he trust me when I tell him that I am a citizen, not to mention a member of Congress? What if that same situation happened to a citizen who had little or no English skills? What do you think his or her chances are that the police officer would let them go? Or try this, my favorite. Who is going to be hassled about citizenship when they're pulled over for a broken taillight? Scott Brown in his out-of-state pickup truck, or Justice Sonia Sotomayor in her car? Those aren't hard questions, right? I think we all know the answer to that question. And the Arizona law seems to throw probable cause and equal treatment right out the window. And I haven't even gotten to the part about state officers performing a federal function yet. Immigration is a federal responsibility, and there's really no dispute about that. But if we let this law stand, we end up going down a very dangerous path. And who knows who the target of the next law is? Maybe Chinese, maybe Eastern European, who knows? Eventually, all of us as citizens are at risk, and it's a very slippery slope. Now, the Tea Party folks who seem to really love this bill don't seem to get upset at the idea of government having the power to stop you and ask you for your documents. But apparently they only care about the government taking away their own civil liberties and civil rights, but not the rights of those people. Arizona law enforcement officials thankfully get it. Many of them, many chiefs of police, have said they don't want to enforce this law. They don't want to enforce it because it's impractical. They recognize that they can't just pull over every brown-skinned person on the roads in Arizona. But if any of those officials don't enforce the law vigorously enough, remember, per the law, they risk being sued. I really believe that the American public's strong support for this bill is partially a result of frustration. What people want is for the federal government to modernize our immigration policy. That kind of reform is long overdue, and people are clearly tired of waiting for it. But I want to see a comprehensive reform that treats immigrants humanely rather than raids them and puts parents in holding cells while their children stay home alone. I want to see a comprehensive reform that holds employers accountable for paying under the table rather than goes after the workers whose rights have been abused. I want to see a comprehensive reform that protects and secures our borders from those who would do us harm, not from those who are seeking refuge. I understand that after this session, there is a panel that will talk a little bit more about the immigration issue. And I hope that you will all stay, because I think it's an issue that is important enough and deserves all of our attention and focus. But before I wrap up, I want to again applaud the good work of the American Constitution Society and to encourage you to continue your advocacy for a more equal, just, and fair America. It isn't always easy to stand up for those ideals, especially when you get the barrage of attacks. But if not you, who? Who will stand up for the communities that always get shut out? Who will give a voice to the people who always are told to be quiet? That is your responsibility as well as mine. Whether the issue is the issue of corporate influence in our elections, the issue of international arbitration panels that threaten to undermine our domestic laws to protect people's health and safety and welfare, or a new law that targets the least among us, or something else that will crop up, because it most certainly will, your voices all matter. Your pro bono work, your donations to charity, your efforts to educate people, even family and friends, on the issue of the day, your letters to elected officials, or your blog posts, all of that combined makes a difference. Yeah, I'm a member of Congress, and maybe sometimes I have a bigger microphone, but your voices are just as important as mine, because none of us can do this job alone. So keep up the work that you are doing today. I'm heartened by the tremendous crowd that has turned out. I'm heartened by the enthusiasm and the energy that you bring to the fight. Keep up that good work, because you never know who is watching or who might be a fan. Someday you might look across the field and see Sonia Sotomayor or Madeleine Albright looking back at you and applauding your work. Thank you so much for your participation in this conference, and again for the work that you do day in and day out. God bless you all. Enjoy the rest of the evening.